Aaron, a hard-working man whose life looks perfect from the outside, beautiful home, successful career, loving family, or so he thought. Everything changed the day he discovered a heartbreaking truth: his mother Ruth has been suffering in silence under the cruelty of his wife Ross. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our little community spread across the world. Aaron Thornwell had always believed he had built a near-perfect life. He lived in a bright, modern home near Cedar Ridge, a quiet lakeside area. To anyone looking from the outside, everything about Aaron's life seemed stable and admirable. He worked hard, earned well, and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who believed they were doing things right. And for a long time, he really did believe that. But life has its way of revealing the truth, usually when you least expect it. That day, Aaron came home earlier than usual. He had been stuck in back-to-back meetings, the sort that drained your energy so deeply that even the sound of your own footsteps felt like too much. All he wanted was silence, maybe a quick shower, and to sit on the couch with his eyes closed for 10 minutes. But the moment he stepped into the house, the silence didn't feel comforting. It felt heavy. Dense. Like the air inside the walls had thickened. You know that feeling? When you open your front door and immediately sense something is off? Something you can't name yet, but your heart notices before your mind does? That was the silence Aaron walked into. He set his keys on the counter and took a step toward the living room. And that's when his entire world split open. Because sitting on the floor, yes, the floor, was his mother, Ruth, her hands tied loosely in front of her, like someone didn't even bother to hide the cruelty. And across from her, lounging casually on a chair with a glass of wine, was his wife Ross. Calm, cold, and disturbingly unbothered. For a moment, Aaron couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His mind simply refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Ruth, his gentle, soft-spoken mother, sitting on the ground like she didn't belong in her own son's home. And Ross, just staring, sipping her wine like it was an ordinary Wednesday evening. The room was quiet, painfully quiet, but underneath that silence, something inside Aaron cracked. Not loudly. Not like a dramatic explosion. More like a slow, devastating splintering of everything he thought he knew. To understand why this moment hit Aaron so hard, you need to know a little about Ruth. She wasn't the type of mother who raised her voice or demanded attention. She had spent most of her life in the small town of Maplewood, living simply, caring deeply, and never asking for more than she absolutely needed. She had this old habit, folding tiny paper cranes whenever she was nervous. It was something she learned as a child, something that always brought her calm. Whenever something troubled her, she would sit quietly, fold a little crane, and place it neatly beside her like a silent prayer. She was gentle. She was patient. She was kind to a fault. And she had moved in with Aaron a few months earlier, after retiring, because he wanted her closer. Or, at least he thought he wanted that. But the truth? He had barely been home enough to see what was happening since she arrived. Life, work, meetings, projects, everything kept him moving constantly. And that silence he always appreciated? It turned out the silence was hiding things. After that day, nothing inside Aaron's heart sat the same way. He tried to focus on work. He tried to keep routines. He tried, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ruth sitting on the floor with her hands tied. The silence in the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt haunted. In the following days, Aaron paid more attention than he ever had. He watched. He listened. He noticed things he had somehow missed before. Ross treated his mother like she was an inconvenience. Not loudly. Not violently. Not in ways that made noise. But in sharp, cutting whispers. In constant criticisms. In small humiliations delivered like casual comments. She banned Ruth from cooking certain dishes because they were too traditional or smelled old-fashioned. She made her eat separately, claiming that Ruth took too long to finish meals. She corrected her, mocked her, controlled tiny details of her day, all while smiling sweetly at Aaron whenever he walked into the room. And Ruth. Sweet, gentle Ruth. Responded only with soft smiles and those little paper cranes. She was shrinking. Slowly. Quietly. trying not to take up space in her own son's home. And the worst part? Aaron hadn't seen it sooner because he was busy building the very life that allowed the darkness to grow unnoticed. One evening, unable to calm his thoughts, Aaron decided to check the security footage, something he rarely looked at unless he was traveling. He clicked through the recordings absent-mindedly. And then he froze. There she was. Ross. Standing in the kitchen, leaning over Ruth, her voice sharp, her finger pointed aggressively. Ruth didn't even lift her head. She just apologized, over and over, for something that clearly wasn't her fault. The video continued. Different day. Different room. Same pattern. Ross shouting. Ruth shrinking. Ross berating her for something trivial. Ruth whispering apologies. At one point, Ruth stood silently at the sink, folding a paper crane with trembling hands while Ross criticized her for being too slow, too old, too quiet, too much work. Aaron felt something inside him collapse. Not because he was shocked, but because deep down, he realized he had sensed this. Just not enough to face it. Ruth's silence wasn't weakness. It was a shield. A way to survive. A way to keep Aaron's world from falling apart, even if she was falling apart inside it. And that realization, that was what hurt the most. The next morning, Aaron didn't wait. He didn't rehearse what to say. He didn't plan the perfect speech. He simply walked into the kitchen where Ross stood pouring herself coffee and said, "Enough." Ross blinked, confused at first. But then he told her everything, the footage he saw, the behavior he witnessed, the disrespect he would no longer tolerate. Ross defended herself immediately. She talked fast, talked loud, tried to twist the story into something logical, something that made sense from her perspective. She claimed she was protecting her routines, her comfort, her lifestyle. She even warned him that if he chose his mother, the house, this beautifully designed, expensive home, would stay with her. Aaron looked around. The glossy counters. The tall ceilings. The curated decor. All the things he once believed made his life perfect. Then he shook his head. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You can keep it. A house is just walls." And that was the moment Ross realized she had lost the battle she never thought she'd fight. Because Aaron finally saw the truth, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Aaron packed a few things. Ruth packed even fewer. And together, they left the big cold house behind. They moved to a small cottage near Larkspur Lake, a peaceful little place with a porch facing the water and soft sunlight that warmed the wooden floors each morning. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't grand. It wasn't anything that impressed people on the outside. But it was honest. And inside that honesty, Aaron felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt alive. Ruth blossomed in the new environment. She began teaching neighborhood kids how to fold paper cranes. Children would run up the path laughing, waving colorful paper birds in their hands. Their cottage slowly filled with hundreds of cranes, hanging from strings, sitting on shelves, twirling gently whenever a breeze swept in. And for the first time, Aaron saw his mother's happiness not as a background element of life, but as something he cherished deeply. One afternoon, Ruth sat by the window with Aaron beside her, and together they folded their 100th crane. When they placed it on the table, Ruth smiled and said softly, "They say every paper crane carries a wish. Mine came true." Aaron looked at her. "What was your wish?" "To have my son back," she said. "The one who finally sees me, not the silence around me." Those words went straight into his chest. Because she was right. He hadn't seen her. Not really. Not deeply. Not the way a son should see a mother who loves quietly and gives endlessly. But now, he did. Sometimes in life, we get so caught up in our routines, our goals, our image, our work, that we forget to look closely at the people right beside us. Sometimes the silence around them is not peace. It's not comfort. It's not contentment. Sometimes silence is a quiet cry for help. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply open your eyes. Aaron learned that too late to prevent the hurt, but just in time to begin healing. Now, in that little cottage by the lake, with sunlight warming the wood and paper cranes dancing gently in the breeze, he finally felt what his big luxurious home never gave him. Peace. Honesty. And a home that breathed warmth instead of emptiness. Friends, thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you even a little, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, warm, deep, emotional, and real, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe. There are many more stories coming, and I would love to have you along for the journey. See you in the next one.